It's been nearly 3 decades since the unsolved murder of 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey, a case that captivated the nation. And even though her parents always denied.
JonBenet Ramsey was only 6 when her life was taken in a terrible way. And for years, her family has faced painful blames and questions. Now, after staying silent for 28 years, her brother Burke is finally speaking out. And what he shares is truly heartbreaking. Join us as we expose the real secret behind the death of an adorable child star. Burke Ramsey's revelation. It's been nearly 3 decades since the tragic story of JonBenet Ramsey first broke the hearts of millions around the world. The little girl, just 6 years old at the time, was found dead in her family's basement, turning what should have been a joyful holiday season into a lifetime of grief for her loved ones. But now, 28 years later, her older brother Burke, who had stayed silent all these years, finally opens up, and what he shares has left the world stunned. At the time of JonBenet's death, Burke was only a child himself, just 9 years old. Yet, the media storm that followed didn't spare him. Instead, it dragged him right into the spotlight, painting him as someone who might have known more than he let on. People whispered, accused, and speculated. They looked at the family, not just with sympathy, but with suspicion. Every move the Ramseys made was picked apart. The questions hung in the air. Was it a stranger who got in that night? Or could someone inside the house be responsible? Burke, now a grown man in his late 30s, chose to speak out in an interview with Dr. Phil after staying quiet for 28 long years. His voice cracked with emotion as he looked back on that painful chapter of his life. He remembered standing at his sister's funeral, staring at the tiny casket, noticing how her eyes looked strange. One of them, he recalled, didn't seem right. It left a lasting impression on his young mind. At that moment, the sadness hit him hard. He admitted that he didn't fully understand what death meant at the time. But when his father gently told him that his sister was now in heaven and then broke down in tears, Burke said he couldn't help but cry too. That moment in the basement, when JonBenet's lifeless body was found, changed everything. She was a young beauty queen, often seen smiling in her pageant dresses. But that image of innocence was replaced by the horrifying truth of how her life ended. According to reports, she had been strangled, her skull cracked, and there were disturbing signs that she had been taken advantage of. It was a nightmare that no family should ever go through. What made the situation even more intense was the terrifying ransom note left inside the Ramsey house. It demanded exactly $118,000, a number that oddly matched a recent bonus John Ramsey, the father, had received at work. The note was long, oddly detailed, and written on paper from inside the house, using one of Patsy Ramsey's own notepads. Investigators couldn't make sense of it. They also thought, who would have the time or calmness to write such a long note in the middle of a crime? That clue alone led many to believe the person that did such a thing had to be someone inside. But no one expected that Burke, the quiet boy who had supposedly slept through the whole thing, would end up being the focus of suspicion. People pointed fingers, wondering why he didn't get up during all the chaos. Why wasn't he curious? Why didn't he come out of his room? Some speculated that maybe he already knew what had happened. But when asked directly if he had hit his sister with a flashlight or bat, he didn't hesitate. He said no. Like, absolutely not. He said he stayed in bed, confused and unsure about what was going on downstairs. In his mind, he imagined something bad might be happening, maybe even a dangerous person in the house. But he didn't know what to do. He trusted his parents to take care of things. Looking back, people have pointed out that Burke seemed to smile during parts of the interview, But those who analyzed his expressions explained that what looked like a smile was more like discomfort, a nervous reaction, not a sign of happiness. As Burke began to speak out, legal experts and reporters who had followed the case from the beginning weighed in. Many remembered how Burke had become one of the most wanted interviews in media history. And this was because he had never told his side of the story publicly until now. To make matters worse, his father, John, once shared how the media's attention broke their family apart. Even a quiet trip to the grocery store turned into heartbreak. One day, young Burke saw a newspaper headline accusing him of the crime. He broke down crying right there in the store. Despite all the pressure, the Ramseys did their best to protect their son. John and Patsy tried to keep things as normal as possible for him. But how do you protect a child when the world is watching and judging your every move? Even the video footage taken inside the house showed a home in chaos, filled with investigators, evidence markers, and unanswered questions. They found a flashlight heavy enough to be used as a weapon, a makeshift strangling tool made from one of Patsy's paintbrushes, footprints, and even what some believed to be stun gun marks on JonBenet's body. But strangely, no clear signs of forced entry. That led investigators right back to the family. Why would someone go through so much trouble inside the house, yet leave behind no trace of breaking in? Even Burke was brought into a police interrogation room. Newly released videos from those early interviews show him being questioned carefully. Authorities explored the theory that maybe he had accidentally hurt his sister and that the parents tried to cover it up. But there was never any proof of that. Irrespective of whatever happened in the past, Burke is now a software engineer and keeping a low profile. When he finally stepped into the public eye, many questioned his decision. Some felt he didn't come across well, despite the fact that there was no evidence linking him to the crime. His expressions and body language were analyzed, judged, and misunderstood by people who had never walked in his shoes. Even after all these years, the mystery of JonBenet's death has not been solved. The Boulder police chief recently reminded the public that the case is still open. They are still looking for answers and still hoping to bring justice to a little girl whose life was stolen far too soon. People remain fascinated by this heartbreaking mystery. Maybe it's because of how young JonBenet was. Maybe it's because the case has everything: wealth, beauty, tragedy, and suspicion. Or maybe it's because, deep down, we all want to believe that justice can still be found, even after all this time. Whatever the reason, Burke Ramsey's long-awaited words have added new layers to an already complex story. But when you think Burke was the only family member that had something to say, John Ramsey, JonBenet's father, surprised everyone with his emotional words that caused everyone to rethink the allegations placed on the family. Just stay tuned, because it looks like the truth is about to be revealed. The fight for justice. For her father, John Ramsey, the idea that the person who did this could still be out there is simply unbearable. He finds it difficult to understand how such an evil act could happen, and even worse, how justice has never been served. John has carried this pain for decades. His daughter was taken from him in the most brutal way imaginable, and yet the person responsible has never faced consequences. John Ramsey is convinced that if law enforcement had done their job properly from the very beginning, the person who eliminated his daughter would have been found by now. But instead of searching for the real criminal, he says they spent all their energy accusing the family, especially him and his wife Patsy. That early assumption created a cloud of suspicion that never truly went away, even though there was no real proof against them. It left the family isolated, grieving, and battling to defend themselves while also trying to make sense of the terrible loss they had just suffered. He described how exhausting and heartbreaking it was to deal with that kind of pressure. Not only did they lose their daughter in a horrifying way, but they were also being looked at as suspects by the very people who were supposed to help them. It was like living in a nightmare that never ended. He believes that this kind of tunnel vision by investigators stopped the case from moving forward. By focusing only on the family, they ignored other possible suspects and leads that could have made all the difference. As the days turned into months and then years, the damage from those early missteps only grew worse. The investigators became more defensive, more closed off, and less willing to admit they might have been wrong. And instead of reopening the case with fresh eyes or asking outside experts for help, they just kept following the same path that led nowhere. For John, this stubbornness has been one of the greatest obstacles to getting justice. He remembers clearly how Patsy struggled through those years. She loved JonBenet deeply and was crushed by the accusations. The stress, the public scrutiny, and the never-ending questions took a huge toll on her. She eventually passed away from cancer in 2006, without ever knowing who took their daughter's life. John carries the weight of that too, of a wife who passed away without the peace of knowing the truth. Even now, John says that the same investigators are still in charge of the case, despite their failures. He finds that shocking. He wonders why no new people with fresh experience or modern skills have been assigned to help solve it. He says it feels like they don't want help, like they're more interested in protecting their reputation than finding the person who actually committed the crime. To him, it's not just about pride. It's about justice being delayed and possibly denied because some people refuse to admit they didn't get it right. That's what hurts the most. That while he has spent every day trying to keep his daughter's memory alive, the ones who should be helping seem more concerned about saving face than doing what's right. He's also very aware of how the public views the case. Because the family was targeted so early, the media picked up on that and ran with it. All kinds of rumors and wild theories were spread, many of them painting the Ramseys in a terrible light. John says this made it even harder for people to look at the case clearly. Instead of asking who really had a motive or opportunity to hurt JonBenet, the world got caught up in drama, speculation, and gossip. Still, John hasn't given up. He believes that with advancements in forensic science, like DNA testing, and more advanced technology, there is still a chance to uncover something that was missed before. He's hopeful that someday, new people will step in and re-examine everything with fresh eyes and better tools. He says if that happens, they might finally be able to piece together what really happened that night. For John, solving his daughter's death isn't about revenge. It's about giving her the justice she never got. It's about making sure no other family goes through what they went through. And most of all, it's about making sure that the person who did this doesn't have the chance to hurt anyone else. His voice may carry the weight of sorrow, but it's also filled with determination. He talks about JonBenet with such love and warmth, remembering her not just as a victim, but as the lively, spirited child who brought so much light into their home. It's been 28 years since this crime happened, and the investigations about what truly happened has never ceased. Rather, it got pretty interesting when John Ramsey suddenly talked about DNA evidence. Does it mean that the truth is about to be revealed? Keep watching to find out. The death of a smiling child star. If JonBenet Ramsey were still alive today, she'd be close to turning 35. But instead of celebrating another birthday, the world still remembers her as the bright little girl who loved dressing up for child beauty contests. Sadly, she only lived to be 6. On the day after Christmas in 1996, her lifeless body was discovered in the basement of her family's house. She had been severely beaten and strangled. Her name became known across the country, not just because of her tragic death, but because no one has ever been arrested or convicted for the cause of her death. More than 25 years have passed, but the mystery of who eliminated JonBenet is still unsolved. The morning after Christmas was supposed to be quiet and joyful for the Ramseys, but everything changed when John and Patsy woke up and noticed their little girl, JonBenet, wasn't in her bed. That worry turned into full-blown panic when they found a handwritten note that claimed she had been kidnapped and demanded $118,000 for her safe return. Patsy called the emergency number, begging for help, her voice shaking with fear. The police arrived quickly, but instead of taking charge and securing the home properly, what followed was a mess that would forever haunt the case. For 6 long hours after the authorities got there was no sign of JonBenet. Instead of treating the scene like the delicate crime scene it was, people came in and out of the house, touching things, moving around, and ruining possible clues. Important evidence was ignored or even thrown away. The way the case was handled from the beginning made it nearly impossible to recover what was lost. Back then, reporter Paula Woodward was covering the case in Colorado. She remembers just how chaotic everything was. But what she could never forget was how JonBenet's lifeless body was found. It was John Ramsey himself who discovered her in the basement, 6 hours after the police had been called. The only detective left in the house had casually told him to have a look around. What if the officers had found her instead? What if the body had remained untouched? But instead, John picked her up and brought her upstairs. Something experts say deeply damaged the investigation. John described that moment with deep pain. At first, he said, he felt a flash of relief, thinking he had found his daughter safe. But that feeling quickly vanished when he saw that she wasn't breathing. He screamed in agony, unable to accept what he had just discovered. The tragedy was already unimaginable, but what made it worse was the way police jumped to conclusions. Paula, like many others, believes the local police ruined the case from day one by quickly blaming either John or Patsy for the crime. John remembers how frustrating it was to be questioned about ridiculous things while the real criminal remained free. All he wanted was for the right person to be found, not to be accused of hurting his own child. People wonder how different the investigation could have been if trained homicide experts had taken over the case immediately. John believes a lot of the mess, the poor handling of evidence, the missed steps, could have been avoided. He says there was no proper crime scene procedure followed. Instead, a mixture of inexperience and arrogance led to a huge failure. On top of that, the police began leaking wrong information to the press, who were all too eager to report anything juicy, whether it was true or not. The media went into a frenzy, especially after finding out JonBenet had been in beauty pageants. That single detail seemed to change everything. Just 4 days after her death, the first photo of her in pageant makeup hit the news, and from there, the world couldn't get enough of the story. What was once curiosity turned into finger-pointing. People began blaming the parents based on how they raised her. Critics said they never would have let their child be in such competitions and assumed Patsy was forcing JonBenet to live out her own dreams. But John explained it was nothing like that. Their daughter had a big personality, and she enjoyed the pageants. In fact, they even joked that she needed to lose one sometimes just to learn life doesn't always go your way. It was never about Patsy pushing her. It was something they enjoyed as a family. Still, the image of JonBenet in makeup became a lasting memory for many. People judged the family, and no matter how many times John and Patsy denied any involvement, or how much evidence was missing to back up those claims, the public had already made up their minds. As the years passed, the case remained unsolved. In 2006, Patsy passed away from cancer without ever knowing who eliminated her child. But 2 years later, a new discovery offered a glimmer of hope. The district attorney revealed that DNA from an unknown male had been found on JonBenet's clothing, something that proved John and Patsy were not responsible. The DNA even gave a heartfelt apology to the family. John appreciated it, but he didn't see it as justice, just a small step in the right direction. He knew they were still far from finding the real person that ended her life. This DNA discovery was only possible because of new scientific advancements. While it helped clear the Ramseys, it still didn't lead to the person who had taken their daughter's life. Once again, the case fell into silence. But then came another breakthrough, one that reignited John's hope. In 2018, the same kind of DNA technology was used to catch the Golden State attacker, a man who had been on the run for over 4 decades. That arrest opened John's eyes to a new possibility. He visited one of the labs and was stunned by what he learned. The technology was powerful, detailed, and offered real results. If it could find a calculated predator after so many years, why not JonBenet's predator? John became determined to have the remaining DNA samples from the crime scene retested using these updated tools. He truly believed that this was the best chance yet to finally bring the case to a close. C.C. Moore, a DNA expert who has solved over 200 cold cases, says her job is like putting together a massive puzzle. She uses genetic genealogy to trace family trees and uncover identities by comparing shared DNA. What started as a way to find long-lost relatives has now become a method for hunting down criminals. Cece said that when she's finally able to name a suspect, it hits her hard because, for a moment, she's one of the only people who knows what that person did. And that weight is heavy. She's confident that if given access to the evidence, she could help identify the person that ended JonBenet's life. Her work, along with that of her colleague Dr. Ellen Graytock, is based on analyzing 1 million points in a person's DNA, far more than the few dozen spots traditional forensic labs use. This gives them a better chance at finding new leads, even when no suspect is in the system. Dr. Ellen says that the way they study DNA today is totally different from the past. Before, DNA was like a fingerprint. You either matched it with someone in a database or it went nowhere. But now, they can actually build clues and find brand new suspects using much deeper analysis. The difference in the number of markers they examine makes a huge impact. This is exactly the kind of progress John Ramsey has been waiting for. He believes now is the time to act. He wants all untested samples from the crime scene to be examined by a trusted independent lab using these modern techniques. He's begged the Boulder police to allow it, but he keeps hitting a wall. He says the detectives still in charge of the case have never been on his side. From the beginning, they believed he or Patsy were involved. That suspicion has poisoned everything. Now, even with all the science available, John feels the department doesn't want to be proven wrong. He's pleading with them to stop dragging their feet, to stop holding on to old mistakes, and to give this case the attention it truly deserves. He's tired of waiting. He's tired of asking. For him, the time for excuses is over. He believes that using the latest tools might finally expose the truth. After all these years, John still holds on to hope. Not just for his own peace, but so that no one else will suffer the way his family did. JonBenet deserves justice, and her story deserves an ending. Every day, people reach out to him, asking why he hasn't cracked the case yet. But how could he possibly do that without access to the DNA evidence. John explained that he can't make any progress unless the authorities let him join the investigation team. It's hard to believe that after all these years, the DNA collected from JonBenet's body is still locked away in the Boulder Police Department's evidence room. The technology to solve the case exists today, yet the police refuse to release that key evidence. That fact alone is heartbreaking, especially if there's no clear reason for withholding it. If the delay isn't due to transparency or some justified reason, it's simply devastating. Out of sheer desperation, JonBenet's father, John Ramsey, has taken a big step. He's asked the governor of Colorado to step in and make the local police share the DNA samples they've gathered. He believes that after so many years, it's a simple and fair request. He said that what truly touched him were the comments people left while signing the petition. Many shared the same message. An innocent child was brutally eliminated, and every possible effort must be made to bring her culprit to justice. Sadly, that isn't happening right now, and for John, that's deeply frustrating. He's now putting his faith in modern technology, hoping it can finally bring the answers they've been seeking for decades. He said that they're willing to explore any method, anything science or experts can offer, to identify who did this to his daughter. If they do everything possible and still come up empty, they'll accept it, painful as that may be. But to not even try, that, he says, would be not just wrong, but shameful and careless. John is open to help from anyone who can move this case forward, no matter where they come from. Some of the support, in fact, has come from the most unexpected people. Old recordings, recently released, were made by a former detective named Lou Smith. His voice, even now, continues to push the case forward. Lou's family believes the man responsible for JonBenet's death is still alive, and they hope these tapes can help finally track him down. Was the imaginary criminal later tracked down? Let's find out. The current state of JonBenet's case. John's journey over the past 28 years has been full of heartbreak. Losing his daughter was more pain than any father should bear. Then he also lost his wife Patsy to cancer. And instead of being supported in his grief, he found himself in the public spotlight, suspected, judged, and picked apart by the media. Even when he remarried, tabloids swarmed his life. His new wife, Jan, said she was stunned to see them splashed across the front page of a gossip magazine after they wed. Through it all, John has never given up hope of uncovering the truth. He has strongly criticized how the Boulder police handled the case, but he always admired one man who stood out from the rest, a retired detective named Lou Smith. When Lou was brought into the investigation team, he didn't follow the same direction as the local officers. He believed JonBenet's family wasn't responsible. Instead, he was convinced someone from outside the home had broken in that night. Lou had an incredible track record. He had solved more than 200 homicide cases in his career, including many that had gone cold. He thought that the person that harmed JonBenet was the result of a failed kidnapping attempt. But his opinion didn't sit well with the Boulder detectives. He faced rejection and opposition every time he suggested they look closer at the intruder theory. Still, he stood firm in his belief. Reporter Paula Woodward, who had been covering the story since day one, said Lou had done something no one else had done. He gathered all the reports, sorted through them carefully, and came to a powerful conclusion. The evidence didn't point to the Ramseys. It showed that someone had likely broken in. But instead of being praised, Lou was mocked and harshly criticized by the local police. After just a year on the official team, Lou left, frustrated. But he didn't stop working on the case. He stayed connected with the Ramsey family and kept investigating on his own. Over time, he collected thousands of tips. From all those clues, he put together a list of potential suspects, names that the police had never looked into seriously. Before he passed away in 2010, Lou handed that list to his daughter, Cindy. Now Cindy is continuing her father's work. She's been working quietly, gathering DNA samples from every person on that suspect list. Her dream is that if John Ramsey ever gets permission to access the unidentified male DNA found on JonBenet's clothing, they might finally find a match and the human behind such a crime. She said her father gave her a name and told her exactly where to start. She and her team have made a promise. They will do everything they can to keep the investigation alive, to make sure this case doesn't fade away and disappear. John still holds on to a bit of hope. He said DNA technology is growing more powerful every year, and if it's used properly, there might still be a way to solve this mystery. He said he'll keep pushing for answers for as long as he's alive. But in a quiet voice, he also admitted something. He doesn't know if it'll ever be solved. So far, there's been no reply from the Colorado governor about John's request. And without access to that DNA, he fears the case may stay unsolved forever. The thought of not finding justice for his daughter hurts him deeply. When asked what he thinks about when JonBenet comes to mind, John's voice trembled. He said the only thing he would tell her is that he's sorry. Sorry he couldn't protect her. That was his job as a father, and he didn't do it. That's the pain he carries. But he knows she was loved, more than anything, and he holds on to the hope that someday they'll be together again. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.